بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we are having our annual Zakat workshop. We had this year as well. Uh, Again, inshallah. I don't want to take too much time with the introductions, etc. Our prospective time period is about an hour or so. I hope to be able to wrap everything up in an hour. Last year I had about 2 hours. So inshallah, let's see how long or how quick I can get through all of the masail, inshallah. So the first thing we want to talk about is what zakat is. So we all have a general idea what zakat is, but when we look at the Arabic word zakah, linguistically speaking, meaning if you use this word in Arabic, it means purity, it means to praise something, it means growth, it means blessings. So from just a linguistic perspective, if you look at what zakat is, you will see that instead of thinking of it as a tax, instead of thinking zakat as a type of punishment or something like that, we view zakat with a purity of our own wealth. The concept is that there is a portion in our own wealth, the wealth that we earn, that belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in our own wealth that we earn, there is a portion that belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we fail to discharge that amount, to give that amount to Allah, then it will corrupt all of our wealth, the remainder of the wealth. But if we successfully give the 2.5%, and this also applies to sadaqat, which is over and above that, then it is a means of purification for the rest of the wealth. What happens when your wealth is purified? When you discharge that 2.5%, which is zakat, the rest of your wealth will be the rest of these three meanings. You will be praised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as someone who has discharged their zakat. Your wealth will actually grow spiritually. Also, in numbers as well, we will see an actual growth, which is a result of the blessings and the barakah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us. So essentially, we give the 2.5%, which does not belong to us. It actually belongs to Allah. He has kept that in our own wealth to test us whether we obey him or not. If we are successful in doing so, we will be praised, inshallah. We will be rewarded. Our own wealth will grow both spiritually and physically. Actually, the numbers will grow and it'll be a source of blessings. Our wealth will be used in the correct manner, and we will have the barakah from Allah. So that is linguistically the linguistic value of the word zakat. When we look at technically speaking, when you and I say the word zakat, what do we mean? In Arabic, you call this هي تملك بعض مال جزما عينه الشارع لفقير مسلم لله تعالى. The translation of that is to give a fixed amount of specified wealth to a needy Muslim for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we will talk about each one of these portions in this, inshallah, this program. We'll discuss, there's a few things to be discussed here. Number one, giving a fixed amount. We're going to talk about what is that fixed amount. Giving to a needy Muslim, we'll talk about the conditions involved for zakat. There are conditions for the giver as well as the recipient. And then for the sake of Allah, we will talk about the intention as well, inshallah. Before we get into the rulings of zakat, let us see how important it is We all recite the Quran, alhamdulillah, and we see zakah being mentioned quite frequently. And we all understand the importance of performing salah. And many times in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about salah, He will follow that up with mentioning zakah, as is in this verse, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ, and establish the prayer and give the zakat, which shows that there is an equal importance given to zakat itself. So just like we view salah so important, something we cannot forego, the same applies to zakat. However, zakat happens once a year. That's why we're not so familiar with the masail and the rulings, and that's why we have to spend some time learning it. Looking at the hadith, the most authentic collection of hadith is, of course, Sahih al-Bukhari. In there, we find a hadith and many ahadith, but this is one of them, in which Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam advises one of his governors, one of the Sahaba, regarding how to take zakat from the people he is governing in Yemen. So he tells Mu'adh bin Jabal radiyallahu anhu, amongst many of the advices, he gives him this advice regarding governing the people. He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ افْتَرَضَ عَلَيْهِمْ صَدَقَةً فِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ تُؤْخَذُ مِنْ أَغْنِيَائِهِمْ فَتُرَدُّ فِي فُقَرَائِهِمْ. Allah has made it obligatory for the people of that place you are going to be a governor for in Yemen to pay zakat on their assets. And the purpose is that it will be taken from the wealthy among them and distributed among the poor among them. This is very unique. A lot of scholars go into the specific wordings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, take it from the rich of that nation and give it back to the poor of that nation. So from this, you can kind of glean one of the purposes of zakat is to uplift a particular community. And that is done by recycling the wealth within that community itself, taken from the wealthy of that community and given back to the poor of that community. So this is from the Quran and the Hadith. Now let's take a look at a few benefits of zakah, to give us some encouragement. This program, of course, is not about the benefits of zakah. We can expound on that at a later time, inshallah, but 5 different benefits that we can get from zakat. Number one, it's a command of Allah, and it's a test of our love for Allah. How does one test their love, or how is one tested in their love of something? When you are forced to give something you love for someone you love, that is a test of how much you love that person. So for instance, if a person loves their father or loves their mother, they should be willing and be able to sacrifice some material possessions in order to fulfill that love, right? So if they're, a person's father says that, I need $1,000, then if a person really loves their father and they have that ability, they should be able to quickly give that money. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that He has made wealth and physical possessions beloved to humanity. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has also created us for the purpose of His love, attaining His love. And so He knows that we love wealth greatly, right? That insan just loves, innahu li hubbil khayri la shadid. Insan, men and women, they love wealth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing our love for Him. If we can give our wealth for His sake, this is a sign of our love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's one benefit of giving zakah. It's a testimony that we love Allah. Number 2, zakat purifies the soul from greed, and it purifies one's wealth from impurity. I kind of alluded to that in the verse before, that when we give zakah, this is a source of purity. Our soul starts becoming more pure when we become in the habit of giving, not only zakat, but sadaqah as well. When we become habitual of giving and our character starts to change, then what's really happening is that greed is being reduced. Every human being has some level of greed, and that is going to be reduced when we give a zakat, the yearly zakat, as well as the optional sadaqat. So we're highly encouraged to give sadaqah as well. And as I mentioned, it purifies the rest of the wealth. So if one does not give zakah, their entire wealth is spiritually corrupt. But by giving the 2.5% on a yearly basis, it purifies the entire wealth of a person. Number 3, zakat promotes the circulation of wealth. Like we saw in the hadith before, you take the, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's advice for his governor was, take the zakat from the rich and give it back to those same people in that community who are poor, who don't have as much. This encourages the upliftment of the Muslims in a particular society. So it promotes the circulation of wealth and, helps people out, inshallah, in the particular community. Number 4, it's the right of the needy. So we may think that 100% of my check or whatever I receive is mine. In reality, just like, the government will take a portion from our wealth, and, what you see on your check may be a reduced number. In the same way, there's a hidden amount that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in our wealth that doesn't belong to us. It actually belongs to the needy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has stipulated that this must go to the needy. And if we fail to give that amount, what we're actually doing is eating and consuming the right of another person, which is, by extension, it can be thought of as stealing. So it's the right of the needy. We have to discharge that. We have to help those who are in need. And we do that through the fard zakat. Number 5, it bridges the gap between the affluent and the needy and reduces inequality in amount of wealth between the rich and the poor. So a community that is giving all of their zakat to their own, it's going to start bridging that gap, uplifting the poor, inshallah, and, helping them out, inshallah, and it will create love between everyone in the community as well. So these are a few benefits of zakat itself. Now, moving on to the actual masail, moving on to the conditions of zakah. So prerequisites for zakat. Who has to give zakat? Right? This is very important. How do I know that zakat is binding on me? These are some of the conditions here. Imam al-Quduri, rahimahullah, a great scholar, he says in his Hanafi Fiqh Primer, a book of, very accepted book of, Islamic law. He says, الزكاة واجبة على الحر المسلم العاقل البالغ إذا ملك نصابا ملكا تاما وحال عليه الحول. You don't have to worry about the translation of what he's saying. These boxes will tell us exactly what he's saying. He's saying zakat is compulsory on every Muslim who fulfills these conditions. And so, number 1, being a Muslim. So a non-Muslim does not have to give zakat. Of course, when they become Muslim, they have to give zakat. So what is the purpose of saying that, like a kafir doesn't have to give zakat? That means that if a person who is not a Muslim, they accept Islam, they don't have to give zakat for all of the years in which they had the rest of the conditions. They only have to give zakat from now onward. So if someone accepts Islam today, from a year from now, they will have to give zakat. They don't have to give zakat for anything before. But if a person who is a Muslim, all their entire life they were a Muslim, today they decide, I want to start giving zakat, I've never given it before, then they do have to fulfill previous years of zakat, right? So that's just the first condition. A person must be a Muslim. Number 2, they must be an adult. Who is an adult? A person who has reached puberty. So an adult is not necessarily a person who's 18 or 21. Rather, when the signs of puberty are manifest in a person, they are an adult. Number 3, a person who is sane. So if a person's insane, then there's no zakat on them because they have no control over themselves. Now, if a person's partially, goes into certain fits of insanity, then and they have a time period where they're not insane, then zakat would still be binding on them. But if someone is completely insane, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created them in such a way where they don't have intellect, there's no zakat on that person. Point number 2, an adult. So a child doesn't have to give zakat, right? A child does not have to give zakat. And you don't have to discharge on behalf of a child either. Number 4, owner of nisab. So nisab is a term which we will talk about. I'll explain what it is. It's a minimum amount that a person must be owner of in order to qualify for giving zakat. So it's a specific amount. We're going to discuss that. If you do not have the nisab, then you do not have to give zakah. If you have the nisab and you have the other conditions, then you do have to give zakat. And number 4, or rather number 5, duration of a lunar year. So a person has to have the first 3 conditions. That's, a personal condition. You have to be a Muslim, you have to be an adult, you have to be sane. Then a financial condition, owner of nisab. And then another financial condition is that you have to have that nisab amount, which we will discuss, for the duration of a lunar year. So let's say a person gets the nisab on January 1st. They first got their nisab, 2022. Then on January 1st, or I should say a lunar month, 1st of Muharram, the person has nisab. They will not have to give zakat until the 1st of Muharram of 1444, the next year. So you have to wait. And then on that same day, if you have, you're above the nisab amount, you have to give the zakat. We'll talk about these conditions, inshallah, in a little bit more depth. The first 3 are pretty, simple and self-explanatory. The last 2 is what, inshallah, we will be focusing on a little bit more. So now a few more conditions for zakat itself. One condition is that a person must make an intention. Okay, so you cannot give zakat unless you have the intention for it. This is for every action, every type of worship in Islam. We must make the niyyah, the intention. So this also applies for zakat. So how does this happen? How do you make the intention for zakat? I'll give you an example of how you cannot, or the incorrect way of giving zakat. This first point here, you cannot change the intention after giving money. What does that mean? For example, a person gave, some money in charity, and they gave it to, the correct recipient. Everything was fine. They gave the money. But in their mind, they never made the intention for zakat. They just wanted to help the person out. This is considered sadaqah, an optional charity. After having given the amount, they say, wait, I gave a substantial amount. I could have just intended zakat. Can that person now intend zakat after having given the money? The answer is no. After having given the money, a person cannot make the intention. The intention must be done beforehand. So making the intention as you're giving the money, that's fine. Or before giving the money, if you've already made the intention in your mind that this is going to be zakat that I'm giving, that's also fine. But afterward, you cannot change the intention. The second point here, must make intention before or at the time of giving. So let's say, for instance, you've already made the intention that I am going to help this needy Muslim out. I'm going to give them $400. At the time of giving, right before you hand it to them, in your mind, you say, hey, let me just make this part of my zakat. That counts. You can subtract that from the amount you have to give in zakat. So that's at the time of giving. Or let's say before, completely, even before you hand it to them, you're like, I'm going to make the intention that this is going to be zakat. That is fine also. But once you have given it to them and they have it in their possession, you can no longer make the intention for zakat. That will be considered sadaqah. The third point here, it is permissible to give zakat on another person's behalf as long as they give consent. So for instance, a husband wants to give zakat on behalf of his wife. That is permissible, but he needs to have consent. So the wife needs to know that, okay, he is going to discharge zakat on my behalf, then that'll be permissible. If no one knows, then the reason for this is because the wife needs to make an intention. It's her zakat that's going to be discharged. So her intention is a condition. So if the husband is discharging that zakat and she doesn't know about it, how will she make the intention? So that's why you need to inform people, hey, I am going to pay your zakat for you. You can make that intention. and I will discharge it. So they're making a pre-intention, and that's valid, making intention beforehand. Then when the husband discharges that amount, that will be considered paid for. But if there's no, knowledge on behalf of, the person who is getting paid for, then that zakat will not be valid. That will be considered sadaqah, just optional charity, and he will still have to give zakat after that. So that's regarding some masail regarding the intention. Number two, another condition for zakat is the transfer of ownership. So when you are discharging your zakat, before you do so, you are the owner. When you give the zakat to someone else, they are the owner. So what are some masail in that regard? First point here, the one who gives the zakat must be the zakat payer or their agent. What does that mean? If you are giving zakat, then you are the zakat payer. That's fine. You're giving the amount. Or you can ask someone else, pay my zakat on, for me on my behalf. So this includes all of the different, Islamic relief and different organizations out there who discharge zakat on other people's behalf. They are considered an agent. So you will give them the amount and you will authorize them that you can pay this, zakat on my behalf. And that is fine. You give them the money and you make the intention. When they discharge that amount to the rightful recipients, that is completely fine. That is okay. So you don't really have to find the faqir, the poor person, and physically give it to them. You can hire an agent per se. So, these different organizations, as long as they're giving it to the correct recipient, and we will talk about recipients later, then that is going to be sahih, is going to be correct. The transfer of ownership. Next point, the recipient must be alive and not an institution. We will talk about this soon. The one who is receiving the zakat, the person, the poor person, they must be alive. They can't be someone who's passed away because they cannot own. So that we're talking about transfer of ownership. The recipient must be the owner. They cannot be an institution either. So if you are giving zakat money to build a masjid, that will be incorrect because zakat is meant for an individual and they need to own that amount. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the coming slides. Point number three, the recipient must not be told how to use the wealth. So when you're giving zakat to an individual, you cannot tell them that this must be used for, this or that. They are free to use that wealth. Right? They are free to use it however they see fit. So you can't say that I'm giving you zakat and this is for your child's college fund. That would be incorrect. Why is it incorrect? Because zakat is a transfer of ownership. When a person owns something, they have complete control over that. So you, as the discharger of your zakat, have no control over what the person does when they receive the zakat. The last point here is zakat does not have to be paid in cash. So now what else, in which way can you pay zakat? You can give food, you can give clothing, and what you will do is you will calculate the value of that, food and clothing, and you will subtract from the total amount that you have to give in zakat. So for instance, someone has to give $300 in zakat, and they buy up $300 worth of food, maybe some rice, grains, things that a person can really benefit from. You wouldn't want to buy them some snacks, of course. You want to give them something that they can really benefit from, dates, etc. $300 worth, and you can give that to someone who is a valid recipient, and that will be correct to do so. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about the nisab. So now, what I mentioned before, nisab can be translated as the minimum quota, the minimum amount you must have in order for you to give the zakat, right? So what is the nisab? In the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 20 gold coins, which were called dinars, a gold coin was called a dinar. 20 of those was the minimum amount. If a person owns that amount, they must give zakat now. And in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 20 gold coins was equivalent in value to 200 dirhams of silver, right? So gold coins were 10 times the value of silver coins in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that is why 20 gold coins is the minimum nisab, or 200 silver coins is the minimum nisab. So now what we have to do is, of course, we don't use dinars or dirhams in our time period. We use dollars or different forms of currency. We take the weight of the gold and the silver, and we find out, okay, how much does 20 mithqals of gold weigh? And as you can see here, the nisab of gold is 87.48 grams, or its equivalent in cash. And in today's time, we will just calculate the equivalent in cash, and that is the minimum amount I have to own for the duration of a year. And then I qualify to give zakat. This is regarding the qualification of zakat. So now how much is that? So 20 gold coins equals 87.48 grams of gold. And if you look at the 200 dirhams of silver, how much does that weigh in grams? The nisab of silver is 612.36 grams of silver, or its equivalent in cash. So in theory, if a person really wants, they can give zakat in gold or silver, but what we do usually is in cash. So now how do we calculate the nisab? What we will have to do, whenever your zakat date is, you'll find out the gold price per gram on that day, which I have done here. As you can see, the gold price today, when I checked on Google, was $63.63. That's per gram for gold. The silver price per gram is 0.83 cents. So 83 cents per gram for silver. Now, how do we calculate the nisab? Just multiply the amount of grams for gold, 87.48, by the value today, 63.63, and you get 5,566.35. This is the nisab, and I titled that gold standard. I'll talk to you about that soon. I'm just talking about calculation right now. Then the nisab of silver. You take the 612.36 grams, which equals the 200 dirhams of silver, multiply that by the price of silver per gram today, which is 0.83, and you get the silver standard, which is $508.26. So this is as of today. So now, as you can see, there's a huge discrepancy. Which one do we take? Is the nisab 5,566, or is the nisab 508? So do we take the gold standard, or do we take the silver standard? In the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, these two were equal. So 20 gold coins equaled 200 silver coins. But in today's time, you can see gold is about 10 times or more than 10 times the silver standard, or the value of silver. So there's a huge amount of inflation and difference in today's time. So now, what do I take? The take home message. I know some of you are not really interested in the details, but it's important that we know where these numbers come from. So generally speaking, the ulama of recent past have always passed the fatwa of the silver standard. That's something that we see from a very long time, actually. And the reason they do that is because it's better for the poor people. If you think about it, if you set the nisab at $500 instead of 5,000, you'll get many more people giving the zakat. And so the poor of that community, they're going to benefit more. And if you set the standard to 5,500, then not that many people are going to give, or at least, much less than if it was 500. However, the ulama in North America, they have some fatwa on, there's some websites on regarding the different fiqh boards in America. Some of them have actually passed a fatwa for America that you can take the gold standard, and they have given many reasons for that. I'm not going to go into detail regarding that, but they have passed a fatwa that a person can take the gold standard. So I would say that if we want to observe taqwa, which that would be my opinion, go with the silver standard. You want to help out more people, you want to get the reward of zakat. We should view zakat as a privilege, that alhamdulillah, my wealth is about to be purified. So even if I have just $1,000 in the bank, let me go ahead and give zakat. But the fatwa, there's always this concept of taqwa and fatwa. Taqwa is taking what's harder for the self, and fatwa is that there is permission. Scholars have passed a fatwa. So if a person actually goes according to the gold standard, they are not going to be doing haram, right? That is actually a legitimate view. But I would recommend that a person tries to go according to taqwa, and even if they only have about $600 or above $508.26, then they should try to discharge the zakat. And of course, the zakat is going to be commensurate to how much you have. It's only going to be 2.5%. So this is regarding the nisab itself. If you just want the khulasa, the summary, this is it right here. Gold standard, 5,566.35. Silver standard, 508.26. Which one do we take? Taqwa dictates that we take the silver. Fatwa is that there is permissibility in that we can take the gold standard. So, if you have, let's say, 3,000 of assets and everything, then if you take the gold standard, then you don't have to give zakat. So this is regarding nisab and how to calculate it. A few more masail regarding the nisab. I'm really struggling to finish on time. We have about like 30 minutes. Inshallah, hopefully we can get through. There is some portions at the end about the 401k and the IRAs and everything like that. If we don't have enough time, and we can skip that, or if those who are interested in that, we can extend the time with the permission of the attendees, inshallah. Let's talk a little bit more about the rules of nisab. So we discussed that a person must have this minimum amount in order to qualify to pay the zakat. Now, let's talk about the other condition, which is you have to have it for a year. So now, we just talked about the nisab, whether you want to take 5,500 or 500, up to you. But now let's talk about the next condition. Point number one must have the minimum amount, which is what we just discussed, the nisab, in their possession for the duration of a lunar year. So this is really important, and most of the times we don't know this, what I'm going to mention to you. And we will talk about that here. And what I want to discuss is the zakat date. Zakat is to be calculated as soon as a person hits that minimum quota. So for instance, this is going to be beneficial to the youngsters who are just getting their first job and have never had that amount. When you first get enough money in your possession, where, let's say, silver standard or gold standard, whatever you want to take, but you first get that amount, $5,500 in the bank, that you have to write down that date. Save that date. It's very important. This is your zakat anniversary. And what you have to do is, and every time, every year, the Islamic year, when that date comes, that is the date in which you have to calculate all your assets and give zakat according to the value of that date. So example, Abdullah received for the first time in his life $5,500 in his bank account on the 1st of Muharram. Now, what Abdullah will do is wait for the entire year. When the 1st of Muharram comes again the next year, remember you're taking the lunar calendar, you look at Abdullah's assets. Does Abdullah have the minimum amount now or not? Inshallah, he'll have more than 5,500 now. If Abdullah has more than 5,500 now after a whole year, he must give the zakat. If Abdullah's amount is less, he actually has 3,000 and he's going according to the gold standard. So he only has 3,000 in his total assets is only 3,000. He doesn't even have to give zakat now. So you only look at the zakat date. So much so, and I'm going to get into all of these points. I just want to clear it up, just in conversation, so we can understand. If Abdullah has $10,000 the day before the first of Muharram, the last date of Dhul Hijjah, before the first of Muharram, that's his zakat anniversary. He has $10,000. And on the last day of Dhul Hijjah, he donates or he gives away or he spends $9,000. So he's only left with $1,000. Now on his zakat anniversary, how much does he have? He only has $1,000. And what is the minimum quota? It's, if you're taking gold standard, 5,500. So he doesn't have to give this zakat. So it's really important that you know that date, right? Because that literally makes everything, like you calculate all your assets according to the value of that date. You don't have to give it on that date, but you calculate according to that date. So that being said, let me read through this, inshallah, so we could get a better understanding. Point number one must have the minimum amount in their possession for the duration of a lunar year. So you get the minimum amount, the nisab, you save that date. This is your zakat anniversary. Now you look at that same date 1 year from now. Right. Next point, one must note down the date in which one became owner of the nisab amount. So write that date down. It's very important. So now what if you don't know that date? Many of us, we have not recorded that date and we've had the nisab amount for quite some time. So the next point here, if one does not know when they first possessed that amount, right, the nisab amount, that was quite a long time ago, 20, 30 years ago, you don't know, you didn't write it down, then they must make an educated guess. Look back into your records, try to find that date, right? Really try to find it. And once you find it, inshallah, then record that date down. If they cannot do that also, there's no records, it's no electronic records, there's no record on paper, it's very hard to know. You try to make an educated guess, just make a guess. And if you can't do that also, then choose a date. Some people, they choose the 1st of Ramadan or the 27th of Ramadan. That's fine. You can choose any date you like. But that is only if you tried to find out the date and you were unable to do so, or if you don't know the date. The standard is you need to know your date. So those of the attendees, if you are just earning money or you just recently got the amount, write that date down. It's quite important. And find out the Hijri date, not the Gregorian, January, February. Try to find, Muharram, Dhul Hijjah, etc. Now, another mas'ala is the 4th point here. One is allowed to pay zakat early. You can pay zakat early, i.e. before the lunar year is over. So let's say, Abdullah has to give zakat according to the 1st of Muharram. That's his anniversary date. He wants to give in Ramadan. That's also fine. Right? He can give in Ramadan. So he's giving beforehand. So now how will Abdullah go about doing this? They will estimate the amount they will have on the due date, right? If they have a steady job, what they can do is just calculate, okay, I should have X amount in my possession. And you can give that early, right? So in Ramadan, he can calculate how much he's going to have in Muharram and calculate his zakat and give that in Ramadan. And many people do that because they want the blessings of Ramadan, which is fine. Even if you have another date in the year, you can give in another date. So now the question comes up, what if he gave more than he had to? Or what if he gave less than he had to? Because he's giving early. He's doing estimated zakat. So he's giving early. What does he do then? So the last sentence here on point number 4, if one did not give enough, then they can give more. So Abdullah in Ramadan, he gave $300 for his zakat. When Muharram comes, he finds out, according to his calculations, he should have gave $400. So he just has to give another 100. And if they gave too much, it will be sadaqah. So for instance, Abdullah in Ramadan gave $500. When Muharram came, according to his calculations, he only had to give 400. So he's not going to get a refund. The extra $100 is going to be sadaqah, is going to get rewards for that in the hereafter, inshallah. And it's going to be an extra source of purification for his wealth. Okay, next point. What is observed, we're talking about the year here. What is observed is the beginning of the year and the end, not the middle. So now what does this mean? As we have mentioned, a person must have the nisab amount. And you calculate, excuse me, you will see 1 year from that date, on your anniversary date, how much you have. For example, Abdullah, he first got the nisab on the 1st of Muharram. Only on the 1st of Muharram next year will he look at his assets. He's not going to look at, okay, did I maintain the gold standard 5,500 throughout every day of the year? And if it dipped below the 5,500 mark, then I don't have to give zakat. It doesn't work like that. You only look at the date of your zakat anniversary. So that's why that date is specific and it's very important. So what Abdullah is going to do is, say for instance, on the 1st of Muharram, he had 5,500, whatever the gold standard was, if he wants to take the gold standard. In Dhul Hijjah, or let's say Jumad al-Ula, in the middle of the year, he spends quite a lot of money, and he only has $1,000 left in the bank. But then when Muharram comes again, the 1st of Muharram, which is his date, his anniversary date, he has over 5,500. He's still going to have to give zakat. So you don't look at the middle of the year, you look at that anniversary date. You had the nisab on that date, that's why it started. 1 year from now, on that anniversary date, do you have above the nisab? If so, you have to give zakat. If you have below the nisab, you do not have to give the zakat. Okay. Now there's another question that comes up. What if someone just gifts his spouse, or she gifts her spouse 90% of their wealth so that they don't have to give zakat the day before? So Abdullah, he has $10,000 the day before the 1st of Muharram. He gives his wife 9,000. On the day that he has to give zakat, he only has 1,000. So no, Abdullah doesn't have to give zakat. But this is playing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's deen. This is very corrupt for a person to do. And of course, there will be punishment in the hereafter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows exactly what we're doing. So if we cannot trick Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In terms of, the rulings, the scholars of fiqh will say this person does not have to give zakat. But what is being done is trickery and deception. And with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of all. Right? So this is extremely dangerous that a person does that. But if there's a legitimate reason, the person was in extreme debt and they needed to pay their debts off, and it happened to be the month before their nisab or their anniversary, then that is fine. This person does not have to give zakat because they're below the nisab level. So let me read this last point again, inshallah. I hope this is clear. I know it's a lot of information, and very quickly we're trying to jam pack everything in 1 hour, and which I actually do not think I will get through. Last point here. What is observed is the beginning of the year and the end, not the middle. And the caveat here is as long as one doesn't lose all of their wealth. So let me just pause there. If in the middle of the year you lose every single thing you got, you go to zero, then your anniversary will restart. Next time you get the nisab, that will be your new anniversary. But that usually never happens, especially if you have stocks and different assets. You'll never get to zero because they will always have some value. This is a very rare case where someone loses everything. So that's why I say that you just look at the zakat anniversary date. If a person has nisab in the beginning of their year and the end, they must pay the zakat. If they have nisab in the beginning of the year but not the end, on their anniversary date, no zakat. And then their anniversary date will restart. Next time they get the amount for the nisab, that'll be their new date. Okay, let's move on. So now we're going to talk about what are the zakatable assets and what are the deductibles. So essentially what we're going to do is calculate all the assets in which we have to give zakat, have that number, and then we'll also calculate what we can deduct from that. We will deduct that amount from the total, and then at the final amount, whatever we have, the taxable or zakatable amount, we will take 2.5% of that, and that will be the amount that we give. So let's discuss what are the zakatable assets. So, in a nutshell here, one will add all zakatable assets, subtract deductible liabilities, and give 2.5% of the remainder. So that's essentially what we do, how we calculate our zakat. Let's talk about what are zakatable assets. So they include gold and silver. These are zakatable, meaning you will include this in your total value of assets before deducting. Gold and silver, cash, loans, right? Loans that you have given to people. Business stocks, goods. So if someone has stocks, etc. Agricultural produce. For this, like, if a person has a farm, I'm not going to go into this too much because it's really rare that a person, you have to have a few tons of, produce, then it will be accountable in the zakat. And animals and livestock, you'd have to have a lot of cattle, maybe like from 40 camels, 40 cows and onward to be eligible for zakat. So I'm not going to discuss agricultural produce or animals and livestock. If someone does have that many animals, etc., you can ask, inshallah, later on, and I will help you out in that regard. But what we will talk about is the first few. Okay, so essentially, we will have to do is, when we are trying to calculate what things we have to give for zakat, you'll look at how much gold and silver you have and calculate that according to the gram. You have to find out how much is the value of gold and silver on your zakat anniversary date. You calculate the gold according to that price. Gold and silver prices, as you know, they fluctuate. So which price will be used? The price of gold of the date. So let's say you have to give zakat today, then you find out how much gold is worth by the gram, weigh the gold and silver, and you should have that from beforehand, how much it weighs, and you just multiply the gram weight of your gold and silver by the day's amount, that each gram weighs $60, and then you will find out, okay, this is how much value my gold is, and you will include all of that amount in the zakatable assets. Look at how much cash you have, right? Whatever's in the banks, whatever cash you have on hand, put all of that together, add that with the gold and silver. Look at how many loans you have given out. So this is not loans that you owe people, it's loans that you have given out. So you're the creditor. You let someone borrow $10,000. We'll talk about that inshallah soon. So you add that $10,000 to the amount that you will have to pay for zakat. So when you gave the loan to someone, you have to pay zakat for that loan, right? Not the person who received it. And then business stock and goods. So this also includes inventory. So if you have a store, you have a grocery store, you have to include all of your inventory, right? So everything that you have to put a monetary value on it, and all of that will be included in what you give zakat for. If you have a house for sale and your zakat date has come, that entire house for sale, that entire value will be put into your zakatable assets. So you will have to give 2.5% of all of that. Same thing with the agricultural produce and animals and livestock for those who have that. So what are some non-zakatable assets, things you don't have to give zakat for? Number one, jewelry, which is not gold or silver. So if someone has diamonds and, extremely valuable assets, diamonds, emeralds, rubies, sapphire, there's no zakat on it at all. So if someone wants to, retain value in diamonds, there's no zakat on that. It's only going to be in gold and silver when it comes to, jewelry. So there's no zakat on that. Number two, cars and vehicles which are not for sale. So if you own multiple cars, multiple vehicles, boats, etc., a plane, whatever type of vehicle, and that is for use, even if you're not currently using it, but the purpose of that is for use, or you're a collector, you're not selling it. That's the main thing. You are not selling it. Then there's no zakat on that. So you can have 10 cars and none of them are for sale, there's no zakat on it. But if any one of those are for sale, that will be considered a business stock commodity, and that entire value of that item will be included in your zakatable assets. So your car, you don't have to give zakat for it. Number three, properties which are not for sale. So Abdullah has 10 houses, but he stays in, one is his main house and then he has vacation homes. He's not trying to sell anyone. There's no zakat on that. But if Abdullah has one of those homes that he's trying to sell and his zakat date comes and that house is for sale on that date, he has to include the entire value of that house in his zakatable assets. Number four, properties on lease. So if someone is renting one of your houses, you don't have to give zakat for the value of that house. The money that you receive in rent, that is going to be cash. So yeah, there is zakat on that. But the house itself, you're not selling it. So if you're not selling it, someone's renting it, there's no zakat on it. Number five, electronics. So, whatever your computer, your television, whatever it is, these you don't have to give zakat for it. Your cell phones. Number six, household appliances and furniture. These are things you're using. There's no zakat on it. Whatever your refrigerator, your dressers, your furniture, your desks, your bed, there's no zakat on that. And another thing here is clothing. There's no zakat on clothing. I didn't put that here. All of your clothes, your shoes, your clothing, your jackets, etc., no zakat on that whatsoever. You're using it. However, any of these things, if you decide to sell them, then it's no longer considered one of these. It's considered a business commodity, and then you will have to give zakat on it. So that's something you have to consider. If you have, for instance, a lot of clothing that you are keeping for sale, then you do have to give zakat on that. You have to calculate that, add that into your zakatable assets. Number 7, materials used for work. So if you have some, you work with your hands, some tools, machines, whatever you use for work. Even, scholars talk about scholars with books. They don't have to pay zakat for books. So books are not something that is zakatable because these are tools. So these are not zakatable assets. So what you really have to focus on, if we go back one slide, is gold and silver, cash, loans that you have given out, your business inventory, and if you have stocks, things of that nature, even cryptocurrencies, you have to include that into your zakatable assets. Now let's talk about debts. And our time is coming to an end, inshallah. I might have to increase if those who want to stay on, inshallah, no problem. I will inshallah continue. And those who want to log off, inshallah, this is being recorded, inshallah, so you will be able to watch later on. I do apologize for not meeting the time. But last year we did this in 2 hours. So I'm trying my best. So debt receivables. So this is when you have given a loan to someone else. So we're going to talk about that right now. You have to pay zakat on that. So there's 2 types of debts. You have to give zakat on the strong debt, or the strong loan. And what we're talking about here is someone who owes you, right? You are owed, therefore you have to pay zakat on what you are owed, right? You are expecting to get that. So there's 2 categories. There's going to be the strong debt and the weak debt. For a weak debt, there is no zakat. And for a strong debt, there is zakat. So let's talk about these 2. So now what qualifies as a strong debt? In Arabic, you call this ad-daynul qawi. So number 1, forwarding loans, right? The money that others owe you. So Abdullah gave Zaid $1,000. And Zaid is going to pay him back, inshallah. But he hasn't yet. It's the first of Muharram. Now, Abdullah, when he's calculating all of his assets, he has to remember, okay, I'm supposed to get money from Zayd because he owes me. He has to include that 1,000 in his assets. And another, letter B here, which is also a strong debt, outstanding invoices, money owed after an item was bought from you. So either you gave someone a loan and they're going to pay you back, or someone bought something from you and they're going to pay you later. So they bought something on credit, but they bought it from you and you're expecting that money back. So you will calculate that amount in your zakat. They will not calculate it. For them, that's actually a deductible, right? We'll talk about that later. Debts are deductible, but amounts that you expect to receive, another person's debt, what you are owed, that is going to be included in your zakat. So you will find out. Is someone saying something? I think the mic was unplugged. So the amount that someone owes you, you will actually include that into your total zakatable assets. So let's take a look at the ruling here. The creditor. So if you let someone loan something, you are the creditor. The creditor will pay zakat for what they have lent out and for what they expect to receive from the buyer. You expect that they are going to pay you back, so you will include that amount. So you have to keep tabs on everything, what you have sold and have not gotten the money for yet, who you let borrow money. And then on your zakat date, you're actually responsible for that. The debtor, the person who is in debt, will deduct the amount from their zakatable assets. So let's flip the whole thing around. Abdullah actually owes someone $1,000. He owes $1,000. What he's going to do on the first Muharram is find out all of his zakatable assets and cut out 1,000 from debt. And we'll talk about that in deductible liabilities later on. But for now, the loans that you have given out to people, you will have to pay the zakat for that. So you'll include that into your assets. 2 more points on the bottom here. The creditor, the person who is owed money, should add the amount they have loaned out to their zakatable assets. Zakat will be compulsory for all of the previous years in which it has not been paid. Okay, so this is important. Say, for instance, Abdullah, he let Zayd borrow $10,000 10 years ago. Zayd has still not paid Abdullah back. And Abdullah has not paid the zakat on that. So he actually owes that zakat. For each of the years, he needs to calculate that debt, how much Zayd owes him, and he needs to give the zakat for that every year. So if you missed zakat, in the previous years, and people owed you money, then you need to calculate all of that and give the zakat for that. Now let's talk about the weak debt. What counts as a daynul da'if or weak debt? And I told you the ruling, you do not have to give zakat on a weak debt, meaning something that someone owes you, but it's weak. So let's talk about that. Receivables arising without an exchange of tangible goods, right? So you are supposed to get a certain amount of money, but not for something tangible. You didn't sell, i.e., you didn't sell or loan anything, yet someone still owes you, right? So someone owes you for something that is not physical. So here are some examples of that. This can be due to employees' unpaid wages. So you are an employee, you have not been paid yet, then you don't have to give zakat on that money. So you didn't receive your money yet. And that is for an intangible good. You did some type of service and you didn't get your money yet. So you don't have to pay zakat for that. Unpaid rent for the landlord. So you have a house. Someone is renting that house. They owe you money, but they haven't given it to you yet. So you don't have to give zakat for that. For wives, outstanding mahar payment. So she is supposed to get the mahar, right? That's her dowry when she got married, but the husband hasn't paid it yet. So we won't say that, okay, every year he's not paying you, so now you have to calculate the entire mahar into your zakatable assets. She doesn't have to do that, because this is money she is owed, but it's not for an exchange of tangible goods, right? And the last example here, outstanding bequest payment. What does that mean? A relative passed away. Abdullah's father passed away, and now Abdullah is supposed to inherit money from his father, but he has yet to receive that amount. So he doesn't have to include this in his zakatable assets. Why? Because it's not for an exchange of tangible goods. Abdullah didn't do anything. His father just passed away. So these are weak debts. So what you will look at is anytime someone owes you some money, but you didn't give them something physical, you didn't sell, you didn't loan, then you don't have to give zakat on that. You only have to give zakat when you loaned out money or you've sold a physical item and you're supposed to get money for that. Then you take those loans and you include that in your zakatable assets. So what is the ruling here? Zakat is not compulsory on a weak debt until and unless one receives it. So once you do receive it, so you're an employee, you got your wages. You're a landlord, you got your rent. You're a wife, you got your mahar. He received his father's inheritance. Now you include that in your cash. But before that, there's no zakat. And second sentence here, zakat is not compulsory for the previous years on weak debts either. So you don't have to give zakat. You don't even have to calculate the previous years. This is a weak debt. Strong debt, like we mentioned, you gave some tangible good, someone owes you, or you gave some loan, physical loan, someone owes you. Summary, a strong debt is from selling or loaning. A weak debt is without giving goods in exchange for it. One must give zakat for a strong debt. One does not give zakat for a weak debt. So that is regarding loans and debt receivables. Let's talk about the bad debtor. This is a person who does not pay on time. So we're still talking about loans, what you have to include in your zakatable assets. So there's two types. You have the debtor, he owes you. He acknowledges the existence of the debt, right? So then these following rules apply. So Abdullah gave Zayd $10,000. Zayd says, yeah, I owe you, Abdullah. I'm getting on it. I still haven't paid, I know, but I will pay you. So he acknowledges, Zayd acknowledges that he owes Abdullah. Point number one, the creditor, who is Abdullah, must pay the zakat, whether the debtor has money to pay it or not. So Abdullah has given Zayd $10,000. Zayd says, I know I have to pay you. Please give me some extension. I don't have the money right now. On the 1st of Muharram, Abdullah has to include that 10,000 that he has given as a loan to Zayd in the amount that he is going to give zakat for. Point number two, if the creditor loses hope from receiving his money after repeated attempts, then there's no zakat. Rather, the money will be considered lost. So if at any time Abdullah feels like, it's been 10 years, Zayd has not paid me, I keep asking him, he's not paying me, I've lost hope. Zayd's not going to pay. So now Abdullah does not have to count that in his zakat, because that money is considered lost, because he has a strong feeling that Zayd will never pay him back. And then the last point, thereafter, right? So now Abdullah, so I'm sorry about that. Thereafter, if the creditor receives the debt after many years, then they must give zakat on all previous years. So now Abdullah, he gave Zayd $10,000. Zayd keeps making excuses year after year. Abdullah lost hope. He's not going to pay me. So he does not calculate that in his zakatable assets. Suddenly, Zayd pays him. Now he has the $10,000 and 5 years that he has not paid the zakat for it. He's going to have to now calculate the 5 years of zakat that he owed on the money and include that in his zakatable assets because he actually did get the money. So it's no longer considered lost. So that's if the debtor acknowledges the existence of debt. B, the debtor Zaid denies the existence of a debt. This is very bad. A person, you gave them a loan and they say, what loan? I don't remember. I don't owe you. And there's no info regarding that. So what do you do in that situation? If a debt is denied, right? So Zaid, he's asked by Abdullah. Abdullah says, I gave you $10,000. You're going to pay that back or what? Zaid says, what $10,000? I don't know what you're talking about. So if a debt is denied and there is no proof against the debtor, Abdullah has no proof. He never wrote it down. And by the way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran at the end of Surah Al-Baqarah, إِذَا تَدَايَنْتُمْ بِدَيْنٍ إِلَىٰ أَجَلٍ مُسَمًّى فَاكْتُبُوهُ. When you give a loan to someone and they're supposed to pay you after some time, write that down. So contracts and things, this is part of Islam. When we give someone a debt, a loan, or help someone out, your brothers, everything is great and jolly and dandy, but you must write this down as a rule in the Quran. So you don't have to say, oh, pay me back anytime. This is actually incorrect to do. When it comes to dealings, we have to be very serious because this is a place where things often go sour. So this is a commandment in the Quran. But anyway, Abdullah never wrote it down. He has no proof, no signature from Zayd, and Zayd is denying. Then the creditor does not have to discharge zakat on that debt. Abdullah, he does not have to give zakat on that debt at all because he's denying it. Later on, if he gets it, then he will have to give discharge of zakat. But since Zayd is denying it, he doesn't have to give zakat. Now, here are debt liabilities. So what does this mean? We just talked about all of the zakatable assets, what you will collect and say, okay, this is how much I'm supposed to pay zakat for. So you collected all of that. Let's say you got, $50,000, mashallah. Then you will have to pay 2.5% of that. But before that, you have to subtract your deductibles, right? So now we're going to talk about that, inshallah. What things can you deduct? So these are the deductibles. Number one, short-term debts. So if Abdullah, he has debts, he himself has debts, then he can subtract this from his total zakatable assets. Liabilities which need to be paid within a year. So that's what we considered short-term. So this has to be paid in a year. The total amount of short-term liabilities will always be deducted when calculating one's zakatable assets. So Abdullah calculates everything he has, gold, silver, cash, loans that he gave out, comes out to $50,000. However, Abdullah, within this year, he has to pay off certain things. He has car payments, he has house payments, etc., all of these different things. He can take those payments and subtract it from his total zakatable assets. So short-term debts, you can subtract that from your zakatable assets. What about long-term debts? Something that spans a number of years. For instance, a person bought a home. So now they have, they're under a mortgage or, some Islamic loan deal where they have to pay it off over 30 years. Can they subtract the whole amount? No, they can't. The reason why they can't subtract the whole amount is a person, Abdullah, has $50,000 zakatable assets, but his house is $1 million. He will never have to pay zakat then. So you only look at 1 year's amount. So short-term debts, you will always subtract them from your total zakatable assets. What about long-term debts, like a house or, a car payment that can span years? There's two views regarding this. And again, this is fatwa and taqwa. Fatwa is, this is permissible. Taqwa is, this is the preferred view. Let's, be a little bit more pious and try to avoid certain places where, there's some doubt. Let's be cautious. So let's take a look at that. The lenient view, long-term debts. A person has a house. They're paying it off in 30 years. How much do you deduct? Lenient view is the amount one needs to pay within the course of 1 year will be subtracted from one's gross assets. So Abdullah, he calculated his zakatable assets. He has 50,000. Now he has car payments, house payments. When he looks at that, the lenient view is calculate how much you're gonna have to pay for a year. So car payments in a year, he has to pay 3,000. House payments in a year, he has to pay, 5,000. So now he got 8,000. He can subtract that from his 50,000. And of course, after all of the deductibles, he'll just have to pay 2.5% of what's remaining. So that's a lenient view. And of course, we don't promote the lenient view, but if someone does take it, then there is a fatwa passed in that regard. Rather, we promote the cautious and preferred view, and we recommend it, inshallah. And this will bring us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, it'll have positive effects in which the poor in our locality will have more upliftment, inshallah. So what is a cautious and preferred view? The amount one owes for a month will be deducted. So now your house payment for the month, whatever you're going to have to pay for in the month, you owe rent in your apartment this month, you can deduct that. Car payment for the month, you can deduct that. Whatever fees you have, whatever credit things you've purchased, right? A consumer debt, subtract that for the month. And that is a preferred view. We should do that because it helps the poor more. And there is actually a principle in fiqh where the scholars say, regarding zakat, we should do whatever benefits the poor most, right? So there is a lenient view, but the cautious view is more preferred, inshallah. The summary, debts which are due within the month are deductible. Inshallah, we'll take the cautious view. Debts which are due within this month, you can deduct that from your total assets. Debts which do not have to be paid in the next month are not deductible, right? So if you don't have to pay this debt, like it's not due, in the coming month, then do not deduct that. If you have a debt, you have to pay something off in the following month, the month that is following, then you can subtract that amount in your, from your zakatable assets. And this should be done on the day of your zakat anniversary. All of the calculating that happens on the zakat anniversary date that you have written down, you can pay that later on. So at least you've calculated everything on your zakat date. Last point here. If debts are payable by installments, then a month's debt is deductible. So whatever installment you have to pay in that month, you will deduct that, inshallah. So these are things you can deduct from your total assets. Okay, so now what are some of these? What are some examples of this? Some deductible liabilities. What can we deduct from our assets? Number one, outstanding basic living expenses. So utility bills, rent that you expect that is currently you have to pay for and you haven't paid for the month, then you can subtract that. So Abdullah on the 1st of Muharram, he owes, let's say, $2,000 on the 3rd of every month, and it's the 1st of Muharram, so he can subtract that amount from his zakatable assets. All of the utility bills, etc., he can subtract that for the month. Goods paid on credit. So goods, also goods for business that haven't been paid yet. So you bought certain things. You bought, let's say you bought a refrigerator, and you bought it on credit, and you owe X amount this month. Subtract that from your zakatable assets. If you have a business, you have a grocery store, you bought a whole bunch of inventory for this month, you can subtract that from the zakatable assets. Number three, outstanding salaries for workers and payable service fees. Let's say you have a business and you have certain workers. So the amount that you owe them, their fees, you can subtract that for the month from your zakatable assets. Unpaid dowry that one intends to pay this month. So if a husband tells his wife that, I'm going to pay you your mahar this month. So then what he can do is he hasn't paid that yet, but now since he said he's going to pay this month, he can actually deduct that from his zakatable assets because it's a debt, right? So we can deduct the debts. But if he doesn't say that he's not going to pay this month, then you're not going to deduct that. Number five, loans which need to be paid for this month. So, someone loaned you money. Now, whatever amount you have to pay them back this month, deduct that from your zakat. These will be calculated at one zakat anniversary. So again, your date of zakat, if you know it, that's perfect. If you don't, try to guess. If you cannot, choose a specific day. Usually people choose sometime in Ramadan. You're going to calculate all of this on your zakat anniversary because of fluctuation of prices, etc., especially in gold and silver. You need to know the price for that day. Of course, later on, you can still find out the price of gold and silver, what it was on your zakat day, your anniversary. So you can still calculate it later as well. Now we move on to the recipients of zakat. So I've already gone so far, but inshallah, let's move forward. Everyone seems to be still here, mashallah, so let's continue. Who can we give zakat to? This is important. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about this in Surah At-Tawbah, verse number 60. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله والله عليم حكيم. 7 categories are mentioned here. The ayah says zakat is for the fuqara, number 1, the poor and needy. For the masakin, masakin are also the needy. The fuqara and masakin are pretty much the same thing. So that's why we categorize them as poor and needy. وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا. So that is actually, I put that at number 6, zakat collectors. They can receive zakat as well. وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُم. Number 5, مُؤَلَّفَةُ الْقُلُوبِ, which we don't have that option anymore. There are no people that fit in this category at this date. وَفِي الرِّقَابِ, and that is slaves, number 7. So again, we don't have this category anymore. So we don't find slaves. So we don't give them zakat anymore. وَالْغَارِمِينَ, debtors, people who are in a severe amount of debt that puts them in the negatives. You can give them zakat. وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, those in the path of Allah. This was in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the time of Sahaba, and them after, where there was an Islamic state. There would be people that were soldiers for the government. You could give them zakat. And actually, there's another tafsir of this, fi sabilillah, those who were a soldier and they got lost and they got left behind and they have no access to their money. And so you can help them out using zakat so that they can get home. Wabn sabil, travelers, people who get lost and they need some cash on hand. They may be a millionaire, but they don't have access to any of their money and they're just walking. They have nothing. You can pay them zakat so that they can get home. And so these are the different categories. Faridatan min Allah. This is a fard upon you that Allah has stipulated, and Allah is all knowledgeable and all wise. So these are 7 categories. Number 1, poor and needy. Number 2, people who are in heavy debt, such that they are in the negatives. They have no, the debt overweighs their assets. Let's say their assets are, $5,000, but they're $10,000 in debt. Number 3, travelers that lose the way. Number 4, in the path of Allah. Usually you don't find these people anymore. Number 5, mu'allafatul qulub. You don't find them anymore. Number 6, zakat collectors. So, different organizations that actually help discharge your zakat, then they can take a fee and that won't harm your zakat. So in organization, they promise that they are going to give to these, valid recipients, but they take maybe like 5% or 2% of the amount that you give them. That's fine. You don't have to give extra in zakat because they are amongst the zakat collectors. And number 7, slaves. We don't have that anymore. So 4, 5, and 7, we don't have these anymore. Now, the valid recipients is going to be 1, 2, 3, and 6. And usually you might not find a traveler. So in reality, you'll have 1, 2, and probably 6. When you give to an organization, they'll take a small fee, and that is fine for them to take. Okay, those who cannot accept zakat. We have a few individuals or categories of people who cannot take zakat. You can't give them zakat. Number 1, general welfare projects, hospitals, institutions, or madrasas. Why can't they take zakat? Because they're not a living Muslim human being. Right? They need to be a Muslim human, and a welfare project is just that. It's a project. A hospital is more of an organization. A madrasa, you cannot give to the madrasa's operational costs. Right. So what you can do, if you see a madrasa in Islamic institution and they are asking for zakat, what they are doing is they're taking zakat and they are giving it to the students who require their fees to be paid. That's fine, because the students are Muslims and very pious Muslims training to be scholars of the deen. So that's a very great place to give. But if an institution is requiring operational costs and fees, or to build the building, then that is not what we give zakat for. You need to give it to a live Muslim human being. So you can give them sadaqah, charity, optional charity. That's fine, and that's very rewardable. Number two, construction projects for masjids, hospitals, etc., or someone wants to build a well, etc. That's not going to be correct to give for zakat. Zakat must be given to a person. Number three, the descendants of Abbas, Harith, Ja'far, and Aqil, radiyallahu anhum, as well as the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They do not take zakat. This is a ruling out of honor for the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and these were his Muslim relatives. Abbas was his uncle, Harith also, Ja'far, Aqil, his cousins. We cannot give to their descendants, as well as the descendants of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they're called the Sadat or the Sayyids. They cannot accept zakat, but we should give them, hadaya, gifts, right? So out of respect, we don't give zakat, we give gifts to them. And it's very shameful for the Muslim Ummah if there is anyone amongst these family members who require zakat, and because that shows that we are not fulfilling our responsibility to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We should, supply them with whatever they require, out of respect for our beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number four, a person who owns a nisab. So if someone else owns nisab, they don't fit in those categories. You can't give them zakat, right? So if they own nisab, you're not going to be giving them zakat, unless, of course, the zakat collectors, they're working for distributing zakat, so they're getting their wages from the zakat as well. That's one exception. But if an individual has nisab, and we talked about how much that is, you can't give them zakat unless their debts are so great that it just negates all of the nisab and puts them in the negatives. Or a person who owns surplus assets beyond personal assets which equal nisab. What does this mean? Someone who owns surplus assets beyond personal assets which equal nisab. What this means is, some people think that you just have to find someone who doesn't have the nisab and they can take zakat. That's not true. There's more to it than that. If, let's say, Zayd, he has zero in the bank, can you give him zakat or not? It depends still. You have to look at Zayd's non-zakatable assets as well. So what are those? Zayd's clothing, Zayd's his car, his home. So the basic necessities, you don't count that. So let's say Zayd has one house, one car, and just a normal amount of clothes, and he doesn't have much money in the bank. You can give Zayd zakat now because he's deserving of the zakat. What if Zayd has two houses, three cars, two cell phones, a lot of clothes, and a lot of assets? Then what will be said to Zayd is, before you take zakat, sell the extra house, sell all the extra clothes. You don't need three cars, sell one of them, and then help yourself out before you start taking zakat, which should be given to people who are more needy. So that is why if you have surplus assets, right, then you have to sell that off. You can't take zakat yet. If Zayd sells all the assets, the extra assets, and he has, the one car, one house, whatever his necessity requires, then he can take the zakat. right? So we have to be very careful. Just because a person doesn't have nisab doesn't mean we could just give our zakat to them. We have to also see this person doesn't have extra assets, like they're not, they don't have all these extra homes and extra cars, etc. Number 5, a person cannot give zakat to their spouse. So, this actually happened to the Sahaba, where some of the Sahaba were poor and their wives were rich, very wealthy. So, they were asking Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, can we give? But you cannot give to a spouse the zakat. Number 6, your parents, grandparents, great grandparents, etc. So your aunts, direct ancestors, you cannot give them zakat. Number 7, direct descendants. So your own children, your grandchildren, great grandchildren, you cannot give them zakat. So these who are your direct ascendants or descendants, you cannot give them zakat. However, as you can see in the parentheses here, one can give to other family members other than these siblings. Other than these, such as siblings, uncles, cousins. So you can give zakat to your brothers, sisters, direct brothers and sisters, your uncles, your cousins, because they're not your direct parents, your ascendants, or your children, your direct descendants. So you can give to nephews, nieces, if they are eligible to receive zakat. Like we mentioned previously, they don't have nisab, neither do they have extra assets which equate the nisab, right? So you can give to your brothers, sisters, and this is actually a double reward. You're going to get the reward for giving zakat, and you're going to get the reward for connecting family ties. So it's actually encouraged to do so. Number 8, you cannot give zakat to a non-Muslim. We are encouraged to give non-Muslims sadaqah, which is charity. As for the fard zakah, it is meant to uplift the Muslim ummah. So it's a condition that a person must be a Muslim to receive the zakat. Number 9, you cannot give zakat to employees as remuneration. So you owe one of your employees money for the work that they've done for you. You can't give them zakat for that. That is the money that they are owed. You cannot give them zakat. Number 10, prisoners. You cannot give them zakat because they're not going to be able to use that money in that sense if they have the nisab. So say for instance, Zayd is in prison, but he has the nisab. He has assets at home that, extra assets that equate the nisab. Then Zayd is not qualified to receive the zakat. However, if Zayd is in prison and Zayd doesn't, he fits in the other categories, like he doesn't have any extra assets, he has no money in the bank, then because of those external factors, not because he's a prisoner, you can give him zakat, right? So just because a person is in prison, you have to look at, are they wealthy or not? So a person could be a millionaire in prison. They can't accept zakat just because they're a prisoner. Okay, so this is extra aspects here. I want to fly through this actually. Perhaps in the future we can have a separate program. I actually have separate slides specifically talking about pension plans and things of that nature. I'm just going to go through this very quickly and give you a summary, inshallah, regarding the 401k, IRAs, and also Social Security. Do we pay zakat on that or not? So in a 401k and IRA, the employee or the individual, so 401k, you're going to be an employee, IRA, you're going to be an individual putting into that. In both of these, you have the option to opt in or opt out, right? You choose to engage in this. For the 401k, you choose your 401k. For IRA, you choose the IRA. You are the investor, right? So you are putting in, even if your employer is matching you, then they're giving a gift and you are essentially becoming the owner of that, but you're also putting in. And in Social Security or a pension plan, the employer will invest for the employee, right? So it's different. You're not really putting in, that the employer actually takes out from your amount and they'll put it. It's not something you can opt in or opt out for. You just have to do it. It's just the system. So now, based off of these two things here, for one of them, for the 401k and the IRA, you do have to give zakat on that. For the pension plan, Social Security, you don't have to give zakat for that. So how do we tell? how do I know for which one do I give zakat to or not? Look at who does it belong to, this point down here. If it belongs to you, then there's zakat on it. It's yours. You have to give zakat on it. The key is if you can opt in electively. Can you choose to do it or not? So for Social Security, you can't really choose. For 401k IRA, you choose to do that. So the zakatable amount will be the amount a person would consider his or hers at the time, even if they were to leave their employment. So say, for instance, Abdullah on the 1st of Muharram, he has a 401k. If he was to leave his employment right now, how much would he get from that 401k? So he has to pay zakat on that. And there's different opinions on this regard. In this regard, next slide, inshallah, we'll talk about that. But the summary of this is there is zakat on the 401k and the IRA because you are the owner. Someone has to pay zakat for that. But there is no zakat on Social Security until you actually start receiving that money. Then it's just going to be counted as your cash. And the reason for this is Social Security is forced on you. It's taken from you, your amount of wealth, and the 401k is a choice. You don't have to do it, as well as the IRA. So let me read through all of this. I know there's a lot of information regarding the 401k. If unvested, meaning it's not handed over to you, and there's no zakat, if that amount, the Social Security. But usually what happens is if you, quit your job or something like that, you'll still have access to that. So there's going to be zakat on it. Number two, if it's vested, then there is going to be zakat. If you have access to it, even though there's going to be penalties and fees, you have access to it. So you do have to give zakat on it. Now here comes a question. Should you subtract the fees charged for withdrawing the 401k? So as you know, if the time period for the 401k has not come to fruition and you want to take out that money, you're going to get hit with penalties and fees. What do you pay zakat on? The full amount that's there, or the amount had you taken it out, it would be deducted with the penalties and fees? What do you pay zakat on? So there's two. Same thing. Taqwa. Better to take taqwa, but you can't take the fatwa. Fatwa one, you can take out. Right now, today, on the 1st of Muharram, if Abdullah takes out, he has about 50,000 in his 401k. If he takes it out on the 1st of Muharram, he's only going to get 25,000. So he only has to include 25,000 in his zakatable assets. What is the reasoning for this? If you withdrew, then there would be taxes, penalties. So you'd only get a specific amount, a portion. So you only own that much. So give zakat on that only. So subtract the penalty, the taxes, the percent of non-zakatable assets, all of that, and then you'll get a remainder. So some ulama, they say that pay anywhere from 33 to 50%. So whatever your 401k is, when you're calculating your zakat, pay anywhere from 33 to 50%. Include only that much. So that's fatwa number one, because of all of those fees, etc. if you were to take it out. Fatwa two is that you're going to pay on the full amount. If you can't do so, because sometimes it can be, millions, then record how much you had every year. So every year, this is how much my 401k is. Write that down. When you finally get the 401k, you get your millions, you'll calculate all that amount and give that away in zakat. What is the reasoning for this view? One, did not extract the money, right? You didn't extract the money, so you weren't hit with penalties and fees. So he or she did not pay taxes on it, nor any penalties. So why avoid paying for what did not happen? So the reasoning here is that had you taken out the 401k, you would only get 33%. True. But did you? No, you didn't. So you actually do have the whole amount. It's just you didn't take it out right now. So you have to pay for the whole thing because you are the owner. No one else is the owner. So that's the fatwa number two. And if you find it quite difficult because it's a huge amount, especially when you're close to retirement, write those amounts every year, and then you can discharge that once you actually have access. Stocks and shares. looks like I'm probably going to hit 2 hours again this year, Allahu Alam. But I'm, Jazakumullahu khairan for those who are sticking around. May Allah Ta'ala give you barakah and the knowledge. So stocks and shares. Now there's a differentiation in stocks and shares. So you have stocks, you have all of these different things. It really depends. Are you day trading or are you keeping it for the long run? Day trading is you're just buying it within a month or so, you're just going to sell it off when the price goes up, or even the week. Then you have to pay for the whole amount because this is going to be considered a business commodity. If you're just you're holding it because you're getting dividends, because you're actually invested in this company, you're a part of the company, so you're accumulating many shares, then you only have to pay roughly 30% of that stock, right? Very less of that stock, right? So I'm just going to give you the khulasa, the summary. I'm not going to read any of this. The summary is, if you are day trading and you buy and sell stocks, you have to pay zakat. You have to include all of that value in your zakatable assets, 100% of it. And this involves crypto as well. So cryptocurrency is just like currency. So it's going to be like cash. So you're not going to deduct anything from it. So you take all of that and put it into your zakatable assets. Now, if you buy stocks and shares because like you like Apple, you're invested in the company, you're getting dividends, you're a member of that company. So now you're going to treat this a little bit differently. And the summary of it all is, the scholars say that anywhere from, like we mentioned before, 33 to 50%, you will only calculate that much and add 30% to your zakatable assets. So for example, Abdullah, he has $1,000 of stock for Apple, right? He has $1,000 worth of Apple stock, but he's not day trading. He's not trying to sell this off. He's actually holding it. He's getting benefits from the dividends. He's part of the company, right? By being a shareholder. So what will Abdullah do? He will just pay, instead of calculating, taking the 1,000 and putting it into his zakatable assets, just take about 400 and put that into your zakatable assets, not the 1,000. So let's say a medium amount that's going to be 40%. He will only have to worry about 40% and give 2.5% of that. So he includes that into his zakatable assets. So, I'll skip all of this, and I've given you the summary. So giving zakat of 33 to 50%, that's a good estimate. That's if you are invested in the company, you're not day trading, you are actually going to stay and hold that asset. And that is the end of the program. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reported to have said, "Man adda zakat malihi faqad dhahaba anhu sharruhu." When a person discharges their zakat, the evil is removed from their wealth. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to purify our wealth. In reality, we see the money decreasing when we give zakat, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is increasing our wealth in numbers as well as the barakah. You will see perhaps you won't even get sick, so that you don't have to pay for medical bills. You won't require certain things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you qana'a, peace and contentment. And, your money, just a single dollar, will go a far way. And this is the barakah that we get when we discharge our zakat. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq to learn about zakat, to discharge the zakat, give zakat to those members of our community who are deserving of it, and who can really benefit from it, and uplift our community, inshallah, through this beautiful method of our deen. So there is an email address that if you guys have questions, inshallah, nafisanswers@gmail.com. You can ask me a question, inshallah, I'll get back to you. Also, we have our Q&A podcasts. You can ask on that platform as well. And we do a podcast every week. Inshallah, we can address these issues, and you can listen in to see if your question is answered. Jazakumullahu khairan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all of the participants for taking part and spending your time on a Sunday, your free time. And may Allah give us tawfiq to prepare for Ramadan. As we have said, that you calculate your zakat on your zakat date. but you can pay that at another date. So we can all pay our zakat in Ramadan, but we calculate it according to the date that we have. Barakallahu fikum. وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.